In this video, we're going to create a REST API using Llama3 and Python Flask. So let's get started. Okay, great. So how this project is going to work. First of all, we need to make sure we have an AWS account properly configured because we're going to use Llama3 from AWS Bedrock. So once we have the AWS account properly configured, we're going to request access to Llama3 models using Bedrock on AWS because we're going to use Bedrock to provide the Llama3 model access for us. After doing this, we're going to set up our Python code with Llama3 access using the Both3 SDK for Python and AWS. So let's get into it. Before we proceed, if you like this kind of content, just give me a thumbs up, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you can learn more about AWS and these AI integrations. And never forget that the more you learn, the better you'll become and more value you can provide. So let's keep going. If you are interested in going deeper in these AI integrations, I also prepared a roadmap for you to take a look at. So on this roadmap, I actually added a lot of AI services that you can pretty much just connect and use on your code base. And if you are also interested in going deeper into the machine learning, deep learning concepts, I also added a lot of topics for you to take a look at and deeper your understanding on how these AI models work. So check it out. Okay, great. So once we have an AWS account properly configured, let's search for AWS Bedrock here. In my case, since I was using Bedrock a few minutes ago, then I can see Amazon Bedrock here on the recently visited section. But if you cannot see Bedrock here, you can pretty much just search for Bedrock here on the search section and then have access to the service. Okay, perfect. So this is the AWS Bedrock console. So on the left section, we can see a lot of available resources for AWS Bedrock, like have some playgrounds, like some builder tools, and so on. But in our case, for having access to Llama3, let's scroll here to model access here down below. And then here we can see all the models provided by AWS Bedrock. If you scroll down, you're gonna see here the Llama3 model versions. So here you can see the models provided by Meta. In my case, I already have access to all Llama3 models. If you cannot see it here, you can just pretty much search for model name and then you search for Llama, and then you will be able to see all the Llama models. If you don't have access to the models, let's suppose for example here that I don't have access to the models, just like these Mistral models for example. If you don't have access to Llama3 models, you can pretty much just request access. For requesting access to the models, you have to click on available to request and then you click to request model access. And then you select the models that you want to have access to. For example here, let's suppose that I already have access to these ones, but I want to include, for example, Mistral 7B instruct. And then you click next. And then you click to submit for AWS. So AWS will review your use case and then they will decide whether you have access to these AI models or not. Some cases can be pretty fast, like a few minutes or a few hours to have access to the models. Some cases it can take a bit longer. So once you have the decision from AWS whether you have access or not, if you have access to it, it's going to be green here, just like in my case, access granted. Once you have access to these models, you're good to go for the next steps and create the Python code base. So let's get into it. Okay, perfect. So here we are on our terminal, which is an empty terminal. What I'm gonna do here, the first thing that I'm going to do to create our Python code base is to create a new virtual environment. So I'm gonna use Python 3.10-mvenv Llama3 env, for example. It's up to you for the name. Okay, perfect. So now I have a env here, so I'm gonna make a new directory to create our code base. So I'm gonna call this code. Oh, sorry, it should be make directory code. Perfect. So now let's open up PyCharm on this code folder and configure it to use our new virtual environment. Okay, great. So here I am configuring a new project using PyCharm. So I configured the code to be inside the code folder that we just created, and I configured to use a previously configured interpreter. So this is the Llama3 env that we created previously as well. So I configured it to use the file inside this virtual environment, and that's pretty much it. Now let's create a new project. So let's open up here. Okay, perfect. So this is our new project. First of all, it's just an empty folder. Let's start by creating a new file called main. So here we're going to start our application. So for now, I'm just going to install two libraries with our code base, which is Llama3 and Flask. So pip install Llama3, which is the AWS SDK for Python, and Flask, which is going to be our HTTP framework. And Flask. Let's do it.
A few moments later.
Okay, perfect. So now we have a project with Llama3 and Flask properly installed. So here I'm going to import from Flask, import Flask, and then let's create a method create app, which is going to configure our Flask application. Flask, and then I pass here a name. Perfect, and then I just return our app. And then here if name equals main. Our app is the create app function, and then I just do app.run. For now I'm gonna pass debug true, and for not having issues with my macOS computer, I'm gonna pass a different port. Instead of 5000, I'm gonna use port 3000. Okay, perfect. So now let's start our Python Flask application running. If I just open up the browser and try to use it, localhost 3000, we're not going to see anything here because there's no route configured on our application, but we're going to get into it in a few moments. So here I'm going to create a new Python package here. I'm going to call it Llama3. So let's configure our code module here. This Llama3 is going to be pretty much like a module. So here we're going to have our controller, our services, and everything that we need for this module to be used by a our Flask application later. Then I'm going to import our controller here and set our controller as the blueprint for our application. This way we can configure like a large Flask application in different folders and modules and so on. So let's keep going. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to create here a chat controller file, which is going to be our controller layer. And then here I need to import a few things. So I need to import some Flask dependencies, and then I'm going to create our chat blueprint, which is going to be a blueprint, and then I pass here the name for our blueprint. I'm going to call it Llama3 BP. And then I pass the name. Perfect. So I'm gonna create like a simple route here, hello. And then pass here our blueprint. chatbp.route. So it's gonna be like a default route here for now. And the method is going to be a get method. So I'm just going to return here, hello world. Okay, perfect. So let's go back here to our application, and then let's import our controller as a blueprint. So from llama3.controller import chatbp, and then let's register our blueprint, and then I pass the chat blueprint URL prefix Llama3. Perfect. So here we have here our blueprint configured with our application. So now if I go back to the browser and try to refresh here, actually it's not going to work because we have here a prefix which is going to be Llama3. So actually what I need to do here is to pass a /Llama3 hello world, just like we configured here on our blueprint. Perfect. So let's keep going. So what I'm gonna do here now is actually to define our service layer. Then we go back to our controller. So now it's gonna be our chat service. And it's gonna be a singleton, so I'm gonna configure a few methods for configuring a singleton here, because this service is going to be imported here as a singleton. Okay, perfect. So here actually on our constructor, let's define a few things. First of all, self.brt, which is the Bedrock runtime. Actually here we need to import our Both3 application. I also forgot to mention that to use this application properly, you must have a AWS CLI properly configured on this machine. So I also have another video showing how to configure AWS CLI on your machine. So I'm gonna attach the video for you to take a look at and configure CLI for you on your machine. So once you have AWS CLI configured, our Both3 will actually use the credentials from machine level instead of passing it as in the code level. So Both3.client, so we pass like Bedrock runtime. I'm also going to attach in the video description some code examples for you to take a look at and do your own experiments. I'm also gonna pass Bedrock Both3.client, and then I pass the Bedrock here. Perfect. So let's keep going. Actually, let's create a new method here for returning all the models from Bedrock. So I'm going to create a method here called getAIModels. So what is this method doing? So for now, let's just ignore this parameter here. So foundation models is Bedrock self.bedrock .list foundation models. So we're gonna list all foundation models provided by Bedrock. Then here I'm just printing the result, and then if you see the result, it's actually a very complex return. So let me remove all of this for now to make everything more simple. So then I just return here foundation models, and then on controller, let's first of all import our service from llama.chat service, and then I pass your service chat service.get instance. So I'm gonna replace this to be like getAIModels. So I'm gonna change this as well to be list models. And what we're going to do here is to basically get the models from service.getAIModels. And then here I'm going to return a JSON object, JSONify, from Flask, a result, which is the models result. If I want to make everything more simple, I don't need to actually assign this to a variable, just return the function call directly. Perfect. So let's go back to the browser, and then I pass here /llama_chat, which is the prefix for the blueprint, and then /list models. So let's see what is going to happen. So here you can see all the models provided by AWS Bedrock. The thing is, some of these models I don't have access to. So if I just try to use, for example, model ID and pass the model ID to my application, it may actually crash because I don't have access to all of these models. So, and besides this, some of these models are on demand. You can pretty much use it on demand, and some of these models are provisioned. So the models that are provisioned, you actually need to provision the access on AWS Bedrock console. So you have to prepay AWS to use some of the models, but the models that are on demand, you can just request access just like we did for Llama3 and start using it. So for this tutorial, I'm just going to use the on-demand models, which is the case for some of the Llama3 models. So you just need to pay attention to this detail. So let's go back here and let's make some changes. So as you can see here, actually, we have the response metadata and then we have the actual models. So I don't want to return all of this all the time. So I just want to return the model summaries. So I'm going to filter this information here, model summaries, and I'm also here filtering something else. So here I'm actually extracting the model summaries list, just like we've seen here. And I'm also filtering the models here that have text inside the input modalities, because some of these models don't work with text. Some models are just image. So I'm filtering here all the models that have text inside the input modalities. This one, for example, accepts video as well. So all the models that have text as input, then I'm allowing it to be inside the result. So here, if you want to filter, for example, the models that are just on demand, just like we described, so I can put this as well. So for example, if you want to filter only the on-demand models, then you only put in the result the models that have inference supported types as on-demand, and then you just return the models. And then if you want to pass this like a query parameter to fill the models, you can pretty much do it like a query parameter, and then you pass the query parameter to the function. And then once we do this, here we can see the models. Actually, by default, I think that I'm filtering all the models that I have on demand in the result and the supported type, like this one, for example. And that's pretty much it. Here we can see all the models provided by Bedrock that support text as input parameter and have on-demand mode. Perfect, let's keep going. Now let's create a method to actually interact with the model. So here on service, I'm gonna create a new method called getAIResponse, def getAIResponse. For now, I'm just gonna pass. And we need to define actually an object to receive, to hold the data as well. So here I'm going to create a new file called chat models. And then I'm going to use it from data classes, import data class. And then here I'm going to define the data class model, which is the AI message request. From typing, import optional. Perfect, I need the field as well. So what I'm defining here as a data class, this is going to be our request object. Actually, it should be field. Oh, sorry, it's actually from data classes. Perfect. So what I'm defining here, this is gonna be our request object. So I have pretty much three parameters. The prompt, which is required. You cannot pass a request without the prompt. And you also have the session ID, which is optional. By default, it's going to be none. The session ID is going to control our chat history. And the AI model ID, if I want to pass a different model ID, by default is empty as well. And then here we have a function, which is a static function, which receives a dictionary, which is going to be the actual body object from Flask, which is going to be sent here. And then from this object, we're going to mount our request object instance. And then we're going to pass here as a parameter the AI message request. And then let's import it here. Perfect. And just for seeing what is happening, I am going to print our object. And we also need to define the model ID. For now, I'm going to pass as a static value here as a constant this model for now, meta.llama3.70b struct version 1. So for now, this is going to be the model that we're going to use on our application. And then I'm going to define another function to get the chat session. For helping on a few things, I'm going to actually create a new data class, which is going to be the session manager info. And for this, I also need the chat manager class, which is going to help us to control the chat history. I'm going to attach the link in the video description for you as well to take a look at the data format required by Bedrock and Llama3. So we need to follow some specific format for controlling the chat history and the data to be sent to the model, which is going to be basically this. Let's import this here as well. So this is going to be our chat manager. So this class will pretty much hold the entire chat history for one chat session. So here, for example, we define the constructor, our chat history, which is a list of dictionaries, and then we have basically two functions. So in one function, we pass the message, the user message, and then we append in the chat history a user message, and then we do the same thing for the assistant message. And then here we have another data class which has the session ID and the chat manager object, which is this one. So why I need this? This is going to help us to control different chat sessions. So let's keep going. So besides this get AI response, I need another function to get the chat session. So let's import here field parameters and this as well. So we need to define a way to create a chat session. So I'm basically going to use the UUID library. Let's see if we have the UUID already installed in our application. In this case we do. So I'm going to use UUID version 4 as the chat session ID. So our session ID to use is going to be the session ID if the user defined the session ID. If not, we're just going to create a new chat session ID. And then we check. So we also need another object to hold all chat sessions in our service. So I'm going to pass it here. So this is going to be a dictionary in the chat manager. So basically here we have a dictionary where the key is the session ID string and the value is a chat manager, which is the chat history. Actually, we could call this chat history as well. So on the get chat session method, we pass an optional session ID. If the user defined the session ID, we're going to use the session ID defined by the user. If not, we're going to create a new one, and then we check if the session ID exists inside this dictionary with all chat sessions. If so, we just return it to the user on this object. If not, we're going to create a new chat manager, which is the chat history, and then we assign here using the new session ID as the key, and the value is going to be the new chat session. And then we return the object to the user as well. So here, to get the AI response, what we're going to do. So the user message is going to be the prompt that came from the request object, the model ID. If the user defined it, we're going to use the model defined by the user. If not, we're going to use the default model ID. And the session info is actually the information that came from the get session function. And then let's extract the chat from the function. So the chat came from the session info object that was returned from the function that we just defined. And then here we add the user message on our session using the method that we described previously. This one, we basically pass the user message as a string, and then we append in the chat history list. And then we need our Bedrock runtime as well. And it's going to be pretty much this, our code base. Okay, perfect. So here we pass the model. So basically called the BRT, which is the Bedrock runtime dot converse, which is the method to interact with the model. And then we pass the model ID. We pass the chat history, which is the list with dictionaries inside of it, which is the list of dictionaries. We pass some configurations for our model. We can adjust this to fine tune in a way that suits you the best. and then we call the method, we get our response. And then we extract the text from the model, and then we add the text in the chat history, add assistant message, and then we add here the assistant message in our chat history, and then we return it to the user from our service layer. So the same way we define the request, now we need to define the response as well. Let's go back here and define our response. And then here I just import it. And the client error here comes from bolt to core exceptions. Okay, perfect. So here we just print the message and then we raise it back to the controller layer. And that's pretty much it. So here we have the method to receive a request from the user. And then here we extract the prompt, which is the user message. We check the ID. If the user defined the ID, then we're going to use the model ID defined by the user. If not, we're going to use the default model ID for now, which is going to be the meta Llama3 70B instruct v1. And then we call this method to get the chat session info, which contains the session ID and the chat history. And then here we just extract it from this object, the chat, and then we add the user message that the user just sent, and then we call the Bedrock runtime, passing the model ID, which is Llama3, and then we pass the chat history and some configuration parameters for the AI model. Then we get the response, we extract the text from the model, and then we add the AI message in the chat history, and then we return the AI message as a response object to the controller layer. Now let's define the controller function for us to interact with, which is going to be something like this. Let me import this. So it's going to be on the route for our blueprint, and it's also going to be a post method. So get AI message, so we get the request body, which is the JSON from the request. If the request body was not defined, then we just return like an error message, no data sent. We can pass a bad request as well. So here we pass the HTTP 400 status code. If not, if the body was actually defined, then we create a new instance from the request body, the dictionary, using this method, and then we create an instance from this class. And then we pass this object to the get AI response function, and then we JSONify everything and return to the user. And that's pretty much it. Let me check here real quick. Yeah, that's it. And now let's test our new function. Actually, here it stopped. So let's open up Postman to test our new application. Okay, perfect. So here I am with Postman opened. So I'm gonna pass our endpoint, which is HTTP localhost/llama-chat. So this is going to give access to us. If I switch here to post as well, now we're going to call this method here. And as we define here on our structure, we need to pass the prompt, a session ID as an optional parameter, and the model ID as an optional parameter. But for now, let's just pass the prompt. So I'm gonna define here body raw JSON. So I'm gonna pass here prompt, and then I ask who is the new actor who plays Superman. Let's ask the model. So as you can see, the model can return a proper answer to us. It's referring to Tyler Hoechlin, so it doesn't know about like the new one, which will come on the new DC universe. But anyways, so the model could properly return the information to us. But let's make some tests here. So if I copy here the session ID, and then I ask the model, what was my last question to you? Without passing the session ID, so let's ask it here. So the model returns, this conversation just started, so it haven't asked me any questions yet. So because I did not pass the session ID, the model cannot know that I just asked about the new actor who plays Superman. But if I pass here the session ID, which is a session ID that we defined previously, this one, let's make the same question now, but now passing the session ID. Your last question to me was, who is the new actor who plays Superman? Perfect. As you can see, the model can properly understand the context and remember the previous interactions with it. And that's pretty much it. Now we have a Python Flask application properly integrated with Llama3 that can handle multiple chat sessions. I hope you liked it, and I see you in the next time.